At Sunday Surefire, we have a vision, and that vision is to dish out the most sound fantasy and betting advice in the industry. And guess what? It just so happens that our brand new sponsor at KYMZ Oils has a vision too. Together, we'll give you the fresh picks, and KYMZ will give you all the fresh scents. Beautiful match. All you got to do is Google KYMZ Oils and try out their top seller, Vision, to start smelling fresh today. Make sure to use promo code KYMZ Surefire for an extra 5% off. That's KYMZ Oils. Remember, just Google it. You'll find it. First thing that comes up, promo code KYMZ Surefire.
Sunday Surefire Podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me today is the co-host, Aaron Downtown Brown.
Hey.
And the other co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Commish, how we doing?
What is going on, fellas? Everything is all good here on my end. Football's back in the air. It's an exciting time of year for sure. And it's also exciting because our road trip is wrapping up here. We have touched on every single division thus far, with the exception of the NFC South. So our road trip is concluding down here, down south. So as always, we're going to be using Fantasy Pros ADP, which of course stands for average draft position, half point, 1 QB rankings, the ADP at the moment. So you can follow along at home if you'd like to. And we're going to be running down the division in a similar format that we have in the past. I'm going to mention off the top if there are any studs in the division that we want to reference. We'll talk about rising stars, which are players that haven't currently fully broken out as fantasy superstars quite yet, but we think that going forward, they certainly will be mentioned as studs in the future. We're talking busts, players that they might be good players, they might not be good players, but in any event, they're not the guys that are not going to live up to their average draft position in 2023. And we're talking about sleepers, guys who we think are undervalued, to the opposite of a bust candidate. Players that we think have the opportunity to take a big step and massively outperform their ADP and be players that, could potentially even be league-winning players for you. And then we're also talking dynasty stashes, guys that you can get for a relatively inexpensive price point and kind of just tuck away on a taxi squad or maybe at the end of a bench in your dynasty leagues. So all those guys should be at least relatively affordable to qualify for that category. But we'll start with the top of the top here. We've been touching on studs to begin all of our divisional recaps. And the NFC South actually doesn't have any true studs at this particular moment in time. In years past, we certainly would have mentioned Alvin Kamara's name. But given his suspension and the added backfield competition, I think it's fair to take him out of that category, at least for now. But I'll tell you who is going to be in the mix to be a stud a year from now, and that is my rising star in Bijan Robinson, who's currently going ADP number 9 overall, good for RB4 off the board. And this really is the safest running back prospect that we've seen since Saquon Barkley coming out in 2018. He lands in a perfect spot with the Atlanta Falcons, a team that absolutely loves to pound the football. They had the second most rush attempts per game in 2022, and they used the number 8 overall pick in this season's draft to go ahead and get Bijan Robinson onto their team. So obviously a massive investment. Top 10 draft capital for a running back just really doesn't happen anymore. And the Falcons were happy to pay that high price to get Bijan on the roster. And anyone who plays Dynasty knows all of this already. But if you're more of a redraft manager or you have that mindset, you may be kind of checking back in around this time of year saying, oh, shoot, my draft's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So you want to get educated real quick. Well, you're in the right place here with Sunday Surefire. But if you're surprised to see a rookie coming off the board this early, in the top 10 in your drafts, don't be shocked by that. This guy is going to, in all likelihood, going to produce at a high level, which is why he's going this high. So just know that he's worthy of that first round selection, despite never playing a snap in the NFL. But that I'll keep it pretty brief on Bijan. It's pretty well documented what he's likely going to do at the next level. But Ethan, I know there's another Falcon that you wanted to touch on in the rising star category. So why don't you go ahead and hit me with that guy, my man?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Drake London. His ADP is currently 59 overall, wide receiver 24. And I think at that cost, You're getting a potential receiver with wide receiver one upside, high end wide receiver two. He's the clear alpha in that offense, and had a relatively good rookie year. Analytically, he finished in half point PPR as wide receiver 31. And everyone talks about London's target share last year, and for good reason. He was number 5 last year with a 29.4% target share, and he was number 2 in targets per route run rate of 32.4%. So he was commanding targets, and everybody says, "Hey, targets are earned," and he was definitely earning targets. London had an offensive grade of 83.2 per PFF, which is Pro Football Focus, which was the best among the rookie class in 2022, and second best for a rookie over the past 5 seasons. Just one spot behind Justin Jefferson, and one spot in front of Jamar Chase. So that's obviously a good company to be in. He was the 8th overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. So he obviously has the capital, and he came in the NFL. And as I just stated, commanded a large target share and was the clear alpha in that receiving core. Last year, Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ritter were throwing the ball to London. And down the stretch, Desmond Ritter started the last 4 games. And he was Drake London in the last 4 games was wide receiver 18 in those games without scoring a touchdown. So he was doing well with Desmond Ritter. He had targets of in the last 4 games of 11, 9, 8, and 8, which averages to 9 targets a game with Desmond Ritter at the helm. So I think it's looking good going into this season with Ritter at the helm. London was his favorite target down the stretch. Obviously, Kyle Pitts wasn't playing towards the end of the season, so there wasn't much to throw to in Atlanta. But Drake London was clearly Ritter's top guy, and I just think they're gonna throw the ball a little more with Ritter based on kind of what we saw last year with Marcus Mariota at the helm in weeks 1 through 13. Drake London was averaging 9.6 PPR points a game, 6.1 targets, 65.8% catchable target rate, and a yards per route run of 1.72. And in weeks 15 through 18, with Ritter at the helm, he was averaging 14.6 PPR points per game, 9 targets a game, and 74.3% catchable target rate, and a 3.03 yards per route run. So considerable uptick in efficiency and production with Ritter throwing the rock. But I just think Drake London has a great profile. He has, as I said, the capital, commanded targets last year. I know the Falcons run a ton, which is obviously a risk with Drake London. And if Pitts does come back and does command a decent target share, can Desmond Ritter support, 2 top-end fantasy targets? Who knows? I just think it's hard to talk about the NFC South and not bring up Drake London as a rising star, just considering what he did as a rookie.
Yeah, just a comment on both Falcons players in fantasy. I'm usually pretty picky, choosy of who I want on my fantasy team on teams that are not projected to do too well. But I think you guys both alluded to in both of these cases, Bijan and Arthur Smith's offense is just going to get a lot of carries, and London's going to get a lot of targets, right? So I think in both of their cases, it is an example where you probably don't have to be scared of them in a bad offense because they are pretty much the offense, right? So I think those are the situations where it's totally fine to draft those type of players. Bijan, I think he's just going to have an insane amount of volume, as Kamish said, and as Ethan said, just London will just have most of the target share over there in Atlanta too. So I think that's what I also look for as well. Obviously, you can't really predict touchdowns all the time, but you can predict targets, and London is definitely soaking those all up. So, Kamish, any comments on London before I go on to my rising star?
I guess quickly what I'll say about Drake London, his price point at the moment is WR24 off the board, so right on the WR2, WR3 fringe. If he slips much further into the WR3 range, he's certainly going to be a guy that I I definitely have some exposure to in redraft. If he creeps up any higher, I probably won't. For the reason Aaron mentioned, I'm a little skeptical on this offense and the quarterback play around Desmond Ritter. I'm not sure what they can support from a fantasy standpoint. And receiver is really a crowded position this year for me. There's a lot of really talented wideouts that I like that are going to be attached to better offenses. And in redraft formats, I'd probably rather have exposure to those guys. I like London a little bit more in Dynasty because he's so young. He'll be 22 years old this season, so he has an incredibly long runway ahead of him to be productive in those formats. I'm a little up in the air for 2023, but hopefully for his purposes, he can take a step and kind of put those measurables Ethan was talking about that were really good into fantasy production, which wasn't there for him a season ago, finishing WR 36 and half PPR scoring formats. Wasn't doing much for fantasy managers last year, but hopefully there's brighter days for him coming as soon as this season. So we'll see on that. That's wanted to get my 2 cents in there on London Aaron, but why don't you keep rolling and tell us who your rising star is?
All right, all right. Well, just like Drake London, I'm also going with a wide receiver as my rising star. And that's Chris Olave. A guy I was, if you remember right, Kamish, I was pretty high on him last year. Think I called him out as a sleeper. And it's very interesting as him as is finishing his rookie season, finishing wide receiver 25 last year in just 15 games, didn't quite make it the whole year. Had a pretty impressive stat line with 72 catches, just made it over the milestone of 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. But a key takeaway for me here with Olave is he had to play with an interesting quarterback situation. Last year in 2022, having to play with 4 different quarterbacks, with Winston starting at the helm, but then him going down with injuries, breaking his back, I think he said. But then moving on to Andy Dalton, Ian Book, and Taysom Hill experiment, right? So I think having to deal with a declining Saints passing game, still making over the 1,000 yard mark. Pretty impressive as a rookie. But something I'm really looking forward to in 2023 is who his new quarterback is, and that is Derek Carr. So Derek Carr, got a lot of high hopes for him, and as a Saint, kind of, I think he needed a new opportunity in New Orleans. If you look at just last year, Carr did, if you remember right, Carr did give us a wide receiver 3 in Devontae Adams, right? So if you want to kind of compare Olave to Adams last year, Olave had 119 targets to Adams 180. Just made it over 1,000 yards with Olave and Adams 1,500 yards, right? But the big stat here is Adams had 14 touchdowns to Olave's 4. So big thing here with an upgrade at quarterback here in New Orleans. I think Olave has a lot of room to, I'm not going to say have a Devontae Adams season of last year, but definitely has potential of having a season closer to where he's getting drafted. Where, as I mentioned, last year finishing wide receiver 25, he's now getting picked around wide receiver 13, according to Fantasy Pros. So, yes, that's a big jump. Definitely fits the mold as a rising star. If you don't think, if you think that, that's just a one-off year with Derek Carr, making Adams a wide receiver 3. He's actually had 5 other wide receivers that has had top 12 seasons with Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper, Hunter Renfrow, and don't forget Darren Waller as well, right? So Derek Carr definitely has it in him. I think the Saints, with them being the favorite to win this year, I think Olave has a season that has a high potential to almost, I'm not going to say double, but, definitely climb those ranks at the wide receiver position. So Olave is my rising star this year in the NFC South.
Sneaky call out there on all those guys that Derek Carr has made viable, Aaron. Good pull on that for sure. We kind of think of Carr as like this guy who's just kind of okay, but he does support fantasy wide receivers and tight ends for sure. So Olave definitely fits this mold, and I think the community's onto him as well as being a rising star. Ethan, would you agree on that?
I would agree 100%. I mean, in the dynasty community, Olave is already a top 10 receiver, and he's a very sought after asset in Dynasty. And I think at wide receiver 13 in redraft, it's not a bad price point. According to Fantasy Pros ADP, the wide receiver 14 is T. Higgins. Then you have 15 is DK Metcalf, then followed by Debo Samuel at wide receiver 16. And I'd much rather have Olave than the guys I mentioned after him due to just concerned with some injuries and just upside in their offenses. I just think, as Aaron just alluded to, I think Olave has a chance to break out this year with Derek Carr. He's going to be the clear number one in that offense. And I'm very excited to see Olave take off this year in that New Orleans Saints offense led by Derek Carr.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting experience for sure for all if everything comes to fruition the way that we think it should. Ethan, tell me who you're a little bit negative on though. I mean, we've been talking a lot of rising stars and hopes and dreams and potential and all those fun things that come along with it, but get a little negative on me, Ethan. Who do you think is going to be a bust with their ADP in 2023?
I'm actually not going to get too negative here. I actually don't think the NFC South has a legit bust candidate for us to discuss. I know you guys have agreed on a bust, and we can touch on that player in a little bit. But I'm just looking at ADP in the NFC South. I mean, you have Bijan overall number 9, RB4, good price point just because Bijan is an absolute stud. Well, I should say his stud profile, who we are all projecting to be a stud. And then we just talked about Olave at wide receiver 13. Miles Sanders, RB 19, which is overall 48, which is a good price point for him. London, wide receiver 24. Godwin, wide receiver 26. Rashad White, running back 28. Evans, WR 32, and Kamara at running back 25. So all those price points, in my opinion, are very good. I mean, I would take those players at any of those costs. And I think there's actually a lot of upside with a lot of those price points. And there's one person I left off the list, and which I believe you and Aaron are going to talk about, and that's Kyle Pitts at tight end 6, which I do think is the only person that could probably fit the bust category, just because he is obviously an upper echelon tight end in terms of redraft ADP right now. So I'll turn it over to you guys and talk a little negativity about Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, Aaron, Ethan's in a too good of a mood for my taste. So why don't you get started on bashing Kyle Pitts a little bit at his current cost?
Yeah, I think Pitts here. I mean, it's a situation where I think it's almost 2 years running. I think we're calling Pitts as a bust. It's just the fact that when to draft him, right? So I think the timing with Kyle Pitts is not right, to where we just mentioned they're a rebuilding team, high high volume when it comes to running the ball. We mentioned how high the target share to Drake London is. So I'm just kind of looking at it from a top down view of there's not a lot to go around in Atlanta in the passing game. Ritter did show some flashes last year, but he's still going to go through some growing pains this year in 2023 as well. We mentioned the work Bijan's going to have. I just don't know if Pitts is really going to knock it out this year, which I think he will get some flashes. But when you look at guys like obviously Travis Kelce, Waller, even a hidden gem, Evan Ingram of last year kind of climbing up the ranks, you can get like almost like equal value on down the line for your top 10 tight ends, where you don't need to take a stab at Kyle Pitts, whether, I just feel it's a gamble. Like, okay, is the Atlanta offense going to do decent this year? And if the answer is yes, he might do all right. But, they really need to make a big step, considering what London has done to that offense in that as the number one offense, right? So mine's more just a top down approach. Like I said, I don't like to have too many pieces in low volume offenses, so I kind of draw the line after London and Bijan. So Kamish, what's your take here with Pitts?
My take on Pitts is that I really like him as a talent. I like him as a player. He broke out as a rookie, 1,000 yards, obviously, which was great. But I feel like since then, it's just been kind of a steady decline. And I know last season we were all three of us at the time, Aaron, you, myself, and Captain Carmen. We all had Pitts as our bus candidate in the NFC South. And what do you know? That came through for us. So I have no problem going back to him again this year, just because I don't think too much has changed. I mean, obviously Marcus Mariota is out, which is a good thing, but Desmond Ritter coming in, I'm not convinced that's a massive upgrade to the point where he's going to be this phenomenal target. You know, everyone mentions the Drake London's target share that Ethan referenced earlier when he was talking about him at 29%. And so we know a lot of passes are going to be flying his way. So is that really going to leave a ton left over for Pitts to return a top 6 tight end where he's currently being drafted around at the end of the 5th round? Is that going to leave a lot of meat left on the bone for him in a high volume rushing attack? I'm just not highly convinced that it is, and I don't want to pay this price tag to find that out. And if you look at guys going behind Pitts, you have guys like Dallas Goedert, guys like Darren Waller, both of which I'd rather have at cost in a 12-team league. You know, Goddard, obviously, for the week-to-week consistency that he brings, and obviously Darren Waller for the perceived target volume and higher ceiling that he gives us in 2023. That's kind of the top guy over there with the Giants. So I'm hopeful that someday Pitts can grow into the stud that we want him to be for fantasy purposes in both redraft and dynasty formats. But as far as 2023 goes, I'm just not optimistic that this is going to be the year that he puts it all together and establishes himself as like, hey, I'm taking the torch away from Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews as the next perennial top 3 guy going forward. I'm just not quite there on Pitts yet, but that was a quick little road to the negativity.
Can I touch on Pitt? Can I touch on Pitts a little bit
that we went on there, but we're not quite done with it yet. Ethan wants to jump in on Pitts as well, so why don't you fire away on him, my man?
I do. I'm in a positive mood today, so I just want to defend our guy Kyle Pitts a little bit. As you alluded to, he did have a pretty good rookie year. I mean, he was tight end 6 as a rookie with 1,026 yards. And he only had 1 touchdown, right? So tight end 6 with 1 touchdown. He scores 1 more touchdown. He's tight end 5. And I mean, you can't really ask much more than that as a rookie. And then obviously he came in last year with very high expectations, and he only played in 10 games. He got hurt, but you mentioned target share. He was number 2 in target share with 27.3%. I know it's a low volume passing attack, but that was with Marcus Mariota. With Desmond Ritter, the passing volume did get an uptick. He's never played with Desmond Ritter. So we're kind of unsure how Kyle Pitts is going to fit in, obviously, Ritter's pecking order, but I think it's going to be slightly better than what Marcus Mariota showed us in weeks 1 through 13. And then he was number 1 in target rate at 34.3%. So I think when Kyle Pitts is out there, he's commanding targets. I mean, he's had very little touchdown luck so far in his career. So, and I just think in redraft, I would definitely 100% would rather draft Darren Waller at tight end 7 price than Kyle Pitts. But I mean, there's probably no bigger lottery ticket at the tight end position than Kyle Pitts. And in redraft, he's the kind of guy that can potentially win you leagues with that positional advantage. But I definitely understand the hesitation. He was a massive bust last year for where people had to draft him. So I get why he's in this category. And honestly, in my opinion, he's the only one that kind of fits this bust category in the NFC South.
Yeah, and that's why we had him in there for sure. It is a tougher division to peg as well. Yeah, it was just a mess last year all around, even on a per game basis. The targets might be there, but he was tight end 20 on points per game. So even when he was out there, he wasn't helping managers win. And I'm just not convinced at this price point he will be. But I will say, if you do want to bet on talent, he does have that behind him. And maybe this is the year he puts it together. I think we're just a year ahead of schedule on him personally. But Ethan, I'll just toss the ball right back to you here. Since you're in such a good mood, why don't you go ahead and tell me about some guys that you're really optimistic on that are a little bit further down the board this year?
Yeah, so my sleeper in this division is actually one of your favorite players, Kamish, DJ Chark, wide receiver, Carolina Panthers.
Oh my God, I'm going to throw up real fast. But no, go on about the 6th-year breakout candidate.
Hey, we all love our 6-year breakouts here. But DJ Chark, wide receiver 63, overall 177, the 15th round. And with that price point, he's practically free. And I think he has the opportunity to be the number 1 for Bryce Young in Carolina. He's a guy that has all the measurables that you're looking for in a wide receiver. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, and runs that 4.3, 4.40. But he just hasn't. Injuries have really killed his career thus far, and he just hasn't been able to put together. He signed another 1-year deal in Carolina, trying to prove himself again, and hopefully for him get a longer term deal next year after hopefully he has a good season in Carolina. But just looking at the depth chart, it's Terrace Marshall, Jonathan Mingo, Adam Thielen, and then you have Hayden Hurst at tight end. And Terrace Marshall, he's kind of a similar mold of DJ Chark, where they both came from LSU. They were both a little raw coming out. And Terrace Marshall, he didn't have a great rookie year. I mean, on all accounts, he's having a better camp and better offseason this year. But who knows what you're going to have in Terrace Marshall? He's a complete question mark going into this year. And based off last year, I'm not expecting too much. Jonathan Mingo, another kind of raw prospect out of Ole Miss, big bodied receiver. I'm not expecting a ton as a rookie. From Mingo, as I think he's going to need time to develop. And then you have Adam Thielen, who's an aging veteran. I think his best days are behind him. So in this offense, I don't see why DJ Chark can't be the number one for Bryce Young. And he's clearly going to be the deep threat for this team. He should lead the team in air yards this year. And I think he has a chance to develop a decent chemistry and a relationship with Bryce Young. In weeks 13 through 17 last year, he averaged 10.5 points per game and 61 yards per game. Had 90 yards in 3 of his final 6 games when he played. But like I said, health was his biggest issue. So I just think Chark has a chance. I mean, he's only really showed us one time when he was actually healthy. I think he finished at wide receiver 17 1 year for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he's a guy that just has like the athletic profile to kind of take off. We just haven't seen it. And I hope in Carolina he can take off with Bryce Young. And I just think at the price point, it's not a bad dart throw to potentially get the wide receiver one in Carolina.
Aaron, are you dumpster diving in shark infested waters this year?
Nice. I like
it. I like Baby Shark. I've always actually been a fan of him. Always watching him when he played. I mean, it always seems like he's coming up with big plays. So I agree with Ethan where I think he's their biggest deep threat on the team. So he may give you a couple weeks where he kind of blows up a game or so. I don't know about his consistency, especially with Bryce Young being more of a short to medium route, tosser at QB, especially in year one. So it depends how comfortable Bryce Young is in the offense this year. I don't know how conservative they may be over there in Carolina with him. So I'm actually thinking that Thielen is gonna be the old vet that gets actually a lot of looks over there. But I do think Chark will have some. I guess he's the prime like boomer bust type player in my opinion. But I definitely do agree that he's gonna have some boom weeks for you. So that's my thought on Chark this year.
I won't go on a long rant about DJ Shark and how he's let people down, or how he's one of the guys that Ethan can't quit because he likes his athletic profile from 6 years ago. But he at this price point, there's actually nothing wrong with this call out. Number 179 overall. The guy's basically free. So if it's a last round swing you want to take just to see if he latches on with a rookie quarterback and Bryce Young, I'd say go for it. Like, there's nothing wrong with where you're getting him there. I'll probably look to go in a different direction. I just think there's a lot of mouths to feed there. They're all up in the air. Shark has his warts as well. So I'm just kind of probably at their wide receiver room in Carolina, probably going to be willing to sit it out and kind of see what happens on that front. But another reason I'm willing to sit out on that position group is because I think their tight end is going to be a good sleeper. And that's the guy I want to talk about here in Hayden Hurst, who's going ADP 200 overall, tight end 27. So a tight end 3 that we're talking about here, just buried deep down the board. And this will be only his 6th year in the league, but it feels like the guy's been a journeyman already. The Panthers are going to be his 4th team in the last 5 seasons, which is kind of crazy. But they did make a sizable commitment to him. His 3-year deal contained more guaranteed money and a higher AAV, which stands for average annual value, than any other tight end this offseason. So they did make a commitment to him. They want him to be kind of that security blanket for Bryce Young in the short area. The rest of the tight end depth, it really is not a threat at all. And even the receivers are suspect. Ethan laid out all the receiver room, so I won't rehash that. But young quarterbacks need security blankets, and I think Hurst has just as good a shot as anyone else in Carolina to be that guy this season. And when given the opportunity to fill in that role in the past, he actually has come through. In 2020, he finished tied at 9 overall as the checkdown guy for Matt Ryan in Atlanta. And if you factor in the cost here, he's going even further down from DJ Shark. So he's free. Like, he probably is not even going to be drafted in most leagues, guys. So if you're high on him and you want to take him with your very last pick, maybe you punt it on tight end. You want to get a couple guys on your team to kind of play the matchup game. I think Hurst is a good target for you to really just kind of sit there and wait further down the board to gobble him up for free, essentially. And I know we have a lot of Carolina Panthers fans listen to our show, so I had to sneak in a bounce back play there after I dumped on DJ Shark a little bit. But I do like your tight end guys. Hayden Hurst is going to be a factor this season for the Panthers. Aaron, what say you on Mr. Hurst?
Kamish, I think you just like his long red hair. I think you're jealous. I think you need to grow out your hair, and you can be his number one fan.
Aaron, I don't know if you've checked out my hairline recently, but that's not going to happen, my man. Like the hair game, that ship is sailed for me.
It's not looking good, dude.
It's not a good look for me, man. Like I'm fighting it right now. I'm 32. By the time I'm 40, I'll have nothing on my head, man. Nothing at all.
Well, all jokes aside, other than the hair call out, I think Hurst is a good call out. I've heard you mention him. You've sold me on him already, so I think he's definitely a sleeper this year. So yeah, I'm actually not gonna disagree with the Hurst call out, especially having a rookie quarterback. I think he's gonna need to check down to his safety blanket as we all know that's got to be the tight end early on. So I'm digging the call out and digging the long flowy red hair.
Atta boy, someone's got to support the redheads of the world, and I always appreciate that. But do you got anyone that you're sleeping on in the NFC South that you want to toss out to us?
Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't plan this, but you're gonna hear a lot of New Orleans Saints today for me, and I don't even know why. But in looking at the division, I think I even called it out. There's just like a lot of under the radar guys. There's no studs, as we mentioned, but there's a lot of guys I think can outperform their draft position. I'm gonna go with Derek Carr. I mentioned I was so high on Chris Olave. I think as a rising star, and I think obviously as a wide receiver, the guy who's got to get him there is the QB, right? So I mentioned Derek Carr's past seasons. He aside from 2022, he had 4 straight seasons over 4,000 yards passing. And guess what? He had to compete in a lot tougher division in the AFC West, right? So this is in 2023, the NFC South is a division that I think it's up for grabs for anyone, right? And the Saints being the most favored, I do think Derek Carr can kind of light it up, right? So he finished QB around QB 16 last year, just in 15 games. Remember, he kind of got shafted towards the end of the year with the Raiders, and like, hey, I think we need to check out Stidham, right? So I think just the writing was on the wall. Everyone knew what was going on with Carr. He needed to find a new job, right? So I think he has a great landing spot and a place that, like I said, they're actually favored to win the division. They're a plus 120 in this division. It comes with a new team, new weapons. I mentioned Olave. I know we joke about MT, but if he is truly healthy this year, a healthy MT with Olave and hearing the good news with Kamara this year, adding that with the good defense in a weak division, I think that's all just lining up all for success for Derek Carr this year. So, he actually just finished in between Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers last year in points. And as I mentioned, he only played 15 games with sending out the final 2 of the season last year. So I think he has a big bounce back here. I think he can definitely beat his spot at 21 and climb up the ranks as high up as QB 12. I do think he can get there with the Saints. So my sleeper is Derek Carr in this year.
Yeah, I agree with the Derek Carr call out. With his current price of I believe quarterback 25 or so, I think he does have a back year. I mean, last year his interceptions were up. He had his He had a pretty low completion percentage um, compared to his yearly averages throughout his 9-year career thus far. And then he had his lowest yards per pass attempt in out of the past 5 years. But I do think it was time for him to move on from the Raiders. As you said, he kind of got shafted a little bit down the stretch. They benched him, and I think he's excited to kind of start fresh in New Orleans and excited to get out there and show the Raiders and the rest of the NFL what he's capable of. He has a pretty good supporting cast with Olave, um, as you said, Michael Thomas, if healthy. I mean, you have Kamara, you have Jamal Williams, you have Kendre Miller, and then Raheed Shaheed. And then you have a another guy at the tight end position, when Juwan Johnson, who I was actually potentially going to talk about him as my sleeper, but went with my guy DJ Chark. But I do think Derek Carr has an opportunity to definitely beat his current price, and I think he has a chance to be a high end QB two, with flirting with back end QB1, if everything goes according to plan. But he's had high success in the past, and I think he is set up to be successful as a member of the Saints.
Well, speaking of the Saints and their receivers, let's stick with that group and go right into our dynasty stash category here. And I'm going to talk about my guy A.T. Perry, who's a big body wide out, 6'3", 205, very productive in college, had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Wake Forest. Also put in double-digit touchdowns in 2021 and 2022. He did fall all the way to the 6th round of the draft, but the Saints to me were an intriguing landing spot. Obviously, we have Olave, top of the depth chart. We've talked about him ad nauseum here tonight, so we don't need to go down any further on him. But after him, the depth chart does get pretty open pretty quick. Raheed Shaheed, you got Brian Edwards, Traquan Smith, guys who I guess you could say have a chance to do something, but we've kind of been there and done that with Brian Edwards and Traquan Smith at least. Michael Thomas is hanging around, but that guy hasn't been relevant since 2019, so it's probably unlikely he's going to come back to any serious level of relevance in 2023. So I think A.T. Perry does actually have the opportunity to carve out a role for himself this year. Or if not this year, certainly going forward. So we'll see what he does with the chances that he does get. But if you want to talk about cost here, this guy is not even being drafted in most leagues. Maybe he's a late 3rd round pick in some one quarterback formats. If you play in a league with the 4th or 5th round, maybe he's coming off the board. But if your dynasty leagues only have 3 rounds in your rookie drafts, there's a good chance this guy's still on your waiver wire. So go grab him, scoop him up, put him in the taxi squad, last spot on your bench, whatever you got to do. Just throw him in there and just see what he can do. And if it doesn't pan out, you just move on for nothing, like I've been saying for weeks on end here. So that's those are my thoughts on A.T. Perry. Aaron, do you want to jump in here and give me your thoughts on him?
A.T. Perry, definitely a guy off of my radar. I think just the same. I think you're kind of building up a case for Derek Carr with a historic season here. No, I think definitely a good call out. I also have a wide receiver with the Saints as my sleeper, and then maybe Ethan can comment on both here, where kind of for similar reasons, where I think that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on the depth chart spot is up for grabs. You mentioned Rashid Shaheed, and that was it's actually the name I meant to not say when I was talking Derek Carr, as a kind of a surprise name, but you guys had to bring him up because he kind of just came out of nowhere after week 6. I think in our daily fantasy show, we mentioned it was the week out. I think it was like it was week 7 when he had one catch for 54 yards, but it was like the catch that turned heads around the world, right? We're like, whoa, what was that? What was that shriek of lightning flying down the field? So it was kind of just like a player we thought was gonna just be a one-time gig, one big play, just kind of made his career. But that really wasn't the case with Rashid Shaheed last year. He was he made it 4 times inside the top 32 wide receivers since week 6. So definitely a guy that you just like kept wondering, all right, when's this guy gonna kind of go back to the shadows? But he really didn't do that. He kind of made a name for himself and took advantage of the injuries the Saints had last year. So I'm looking forward to Rashid Shaheed capitalizing in that wide receiver 3 spot, especially with with the MT returning. I think you guys have already joked around with his health and if that's in question. So that might be writing on the wall for both Shaheed and Perry. But Ethan, what do you think about our guys over in New Orleans, or not Nolans as they say?
No, I like both those call outs actually. I mean, I think somebody is going to take that wide receiver 3 role and potentially wide receiver 2 role once Thomas gets hurt inevitably. But hopefully Thomas can stay healthy, but he hasn't proven that as of late. But I like Shaheed's upside. Towards the end of the season, he started to play a larger snap share, and it paid dividends in some weeks. In week 15, he was a wide receiver 1. And then, as you said, he did have some usable weeks. And I think a guy like Shaheed, obviously, he's always has that boom potential, but he's going into his second year, and he was kind of a no-namer last year, but then he obviously got on our radar, and I'm excited to see what he can do headed in the year 2. And then A.T. Perry, I mean, the guy just has a different mold compared to all the other receivers on this team. He's 6'5", 205, and he had a really good preseason debut. He caught all 6 of his targets for 70 yards and a touchdown. So a great way to enter the NFL. And A.T. Perry is obviously free in pretty much all formats, but he's probably going to get some attention now that he had that decent line in week 1 of the preseason for the Saints. So like both those callouts, and there's a potential that they may make some noise this season.
Yeah, good stuff on that. Completely agreed. I think the Saints receiver room is definitely pretty wide open. So it's kind of a take your pick type of thing for these deep dynasty stashes between, whether you're a A.T. Perry guy, a Shaheed guy, maybe you can even grab both just to find out what all the fuss is about. But Ethan, tell me someone that you think there's a plenty of fuss over, at least enough fuss to where you want to throw them on as your dynasty stash and kind of hold on and hope for somebody in the NFC South.
My dynasty stash is Sean Tucker. I like Sean Tucker coming out of Syracuse. I thought he had a very good profile, has all the speed in the world, has decent size. But unfortunately for him, he had a medical condition with his heart come up in the pre-draft process, and he went undrafted. I think he had a chance to be a potentially 3rd, 4th round pick if the medicals checked out, because he did have a solid career at Syracuse. At Syracuse, he in his last 2 seasons he had 1,496 yards and 246 carries, and 1,060 yards and 206 carries his final year. Those were averages of basically 6 yards and 5 yards per carry. And he had 14 and 13 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. And he also caught 56 balls in those last 2 seasons. So definitely had the production at Syracuse. As I said, I liked his profile. I think it's pretty cool that he's wearing number 44, representing Syracuse, like Jim Brown and Ernie Davis. So I definitely think that's a pretty cool story coming out of Syracuse, and I wish him the best. I do think he would have been a 2nd round pick in pretty much all rookie drafts if he did get drafted. But as I said, the medical issues led him to be a UDFA. And just looking at the depth chart, you have Rachaad White going into year 2, the clear RB1 on that team. But then after that, you have Chase Edmonds, who's on a 1-year deal. Keyshawn Vaughn, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2024. And then you have Sean Tucker. So heading into 2024, the only 2 running backs that are currently on the roster that are guaranteed to be on the roster, that's if Sean Tucker makes the team anyways, is Rachaad White and Sean Tucker. And with the way the NFL teams value the running back position, if you can find a UDFA like Sean Tucker to tote the rock and be productive and pay him absolutely nothing, I feel like that's the way the NFL is trending. I mean, his total 3-year deal is worth up to $2.7 million with only $155,000 guaranteed, which was his signing bonus. So Sean Tucker, I think he has a ton of upside, and I hope he gets an opportunity to showcase what he can do in the NFL, because I liked watching his tape at Syracuse, and I am rooting for the kid. I'm glad he was cleared, and we'll see what he can do. But definitely not a bad a flyer that you can pick up on waivers in your dynasty leagues.
100% agreed. And I don't think he actually got drafted in any leagues that we play in, but I know for a fact that I've never seen a UDFA have so much buzz in the free agent bidding immediately following a rookie draft than we have with Sean Tucker. Like people were spending like 20-30% of their fab right off the gate on a UDFA, which just not happen. And that's for all the reasons that Ethan mentioned, between the opportunity in Tampa Bay and just because what he did in college and where he would have been drafted if he had gotten the clean bill of health. So I'm pretty high on Sean Tucker too. I was one of the guys spending up big money on him in at least one of my leagues. So
I was too.
yeah, so we're all been there. Maybe Aaron's the odd man out on that, but who knows? Aaron, you got any Sean Tucker hanging around?
I don't have very many shares of him, but I think, I think it is a perfect scenario, as Ethan said, that, if you're a dynasty owner out there that, you may have put all your eggs in one basket and you might have one of those teams that, might not have that many or any draft picks. Like these are the guys you need to pick up in the waivers, as Ethan said. Like take a look at the contracts remaining on the team. I love that fact in Tampa Bay. I think that's a great call out there, because that's your way you kind of scratch and maybe claw your way back in a dynasty league where you're left with just a bunch of vets, right? So there is a light at light at the end of the tunnel, as they say, if you can get lucky with some of these undrafted free agents. So I'm gonna agree with the take there. I think he's just in a great position to stay on the team and maybe be the next man up after White.
Yeah, completely agreed on that. And speaking of the light at the end of the tunnel, we've made it all the way through that tunnel with the divisions, fellas. That concludes our road trip around each and every division. So we spent 8 episodes on it. It was a lot of fun to go through the division, talk about the stud, the sleepers, the rising stars, dynasty stashes. All that's now behind us, and we got redraft season. We're about to step into prime redraft season in the next week or so. So definitely keep staying tuned on here. We're going to be very redraft heavy in the coming weeks, and that before we know it, football will be here for real. None of this preseason watered down stuff. We'll get actual live NFL football coming up in less than a month, which is awesome to think about. And so we're looking forward to diving into all that, all the challenges and all the fun that comes with it. And until next time, folks, peace.